My name is Hannah Teinzer. I am your moderator for this session, and we have very interesting topic, which is about simplifying the UI5 control development from Wouter, who is an independent SAP solution architect who loves to make beautiful UI5 application. And if you have followed recap yesterday as well as today, his name is everywhere. That's what I noticed. And of course, we also have Jérémy here, who has also a very interesting profile, moving from ABAP developer, become Web Pro developer, and turn into a UI5 developer. So the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hey, it's okay. So today we're going to quickly talk about simplifying and why controls. I mean, we all have questions about controls. We saw Web Components just by Peter Music. We have a lot of questions, and I think I'm going to ask Wouter a couple of questions, and I hope he will clarify a lot of questions for everybody. So my first question to you, Wouter, is why do I want to develop my own control, and when should I develop my own control?
So it's a good question, an important question. When and why should you use UI5 controls? Often what I see in UI5 applications is people are putting HTML in formatted text, and it works perfectly fine. Or that you combine HTML syntax in your XML view. It's possible in some ways, and then you do data binding, but it's not the best way to do this. You don't benefit from the framework, it's not reusable, and you are not bundling it as a control. So if you really want to do UI5, injecting HTML in UI5, the best way to do this is by making a UI5 control, because then you benefit from the framework. The rendering, you have control of the rendering. When should it re-render? Which part of the control should re-render? The properties, reusability, adding logic to the HTML and reuse it in other applications by using a library. That's the whole point of UI5 controls. One of the examples we discussed before this session was a stupid iframe, for example. Jérémy had to do something in an iframe. It started with a simple URL to another application, but it came with other properties. So in the end, we ended up with a UI5 control, put all the different properties as properties for the UI5 control, and even added some additional logic, because iframes, they can communicate between each other, and then we can isolate this in the control, and we can reuse it afterwards. So that's why and how.
Okay, can you show us, Wouter? Because I think we're all a bit technical here, so we want to see something. We want to see code.
That was the theory. So I made an example project, and as Jérémy said, it's not a goal to go in very details, but we prepared a small project. And can everyone see it clearly also in the back? Yeah? I can zoom in more. So we have here a UI5, it's a workspace with a control, with a library and a control, and a project. So here I have my library, it's called Space. And maybe before I continue, we have it running, so I will show you how it looks. I have it already open. It's my famous Star Wars control, where you have the introduction of the Star Wars movie with a logo, some articles. That's the control I use as a demo purpose. And we have here this library. In the library, there are two controls. Of course, the example was coming from the generator. I will zoom in a little bit more. And we have a space, which is the parent with the background, the stars, the title, the logo, and the space item, which comes then with the different titles and articles and so on. I'm not going to zoom in, but it's a typical control. You can find the documentation for defining the properties, events, and things like that. It's all in documentation. So we use it then in an application by simply using an NPM dependency. Like here we have a dependency, and we use just the local part. From here, we are able to find it back in the manifest. So we configure the manifest. In the manifest, we have defined the library, and then we can use it in the view. In the view, you see here space and two space items, and so you could continue. You can use the bindings, etc., everything you like. You can put in events, whatever. So to come back, to basically summarize how it works, you have controls, as a recommendation and best practice, it's always best to put in a library because it bundles not only the render the HTML part with the the HTML part with the control part, but also the CSS. It's all bundled for the theming. Everything is bundled in a library and can be reused across multiple applications. And that's what we did in this example.
Okay, Wouter, this looks very nice. We hear a lot about web components and UI5 web components. Is there something you can tell me or tell us about UI5 web components?
Yeah, I would say welcome to the dark side. Or maybe the good side, I don't know yet. It's still not clearly, but I will try to clarify a little bit based on what we saw today and based on what we already had. Web components are basically, maybe first web components, what is it? Because we saw a lot of things about web components. Web components, it's basically building your own DOM elements. Like you have a div, a paragraph, an image in HTML. With web components, you can build your own DOM elements. And UI5 Web Components is a flavor on top of those web components. And I can show you right away, a web component in UI5 comes with the typical events that you know from like on-after rendering, init. The things that we know in UI5 controls are also implemented in UI5 Web Components. Also the theming, like the themes from Fiori, are also applied to those web components. And that's basically a flavor on top of web components. That's what web components are, Jérémy.
Okay, I think it's time again to dive into some code.
Yeah, show how it's connected. So this was it for the control, a library with a control and an application. Now for the web components, I have a different project, and I will zoom in a little bit more. Here we also have a third package. This package is for the web component. You can bundle different web components like you do in UI5 libraries as a package, a web component package. And here in the source, we have similar, we have a renderer for the HTML of our web component, and we have a controller just like we have it for controls, but now web components. It comes with a template. They use handlebars like bindings and a controller. And as you can see here, the syntax like on-after rendering, that's typically something from UI5 that they put into UI5 web components. Now, to bring this to UI5, there is a library. And this library is being generated. And here we have the components being generated, the controls, the UI5 controls on top of the UI5 web components generated. But I need to add to this. Who of you saw the presentation from Peter just a few minutes ago? And so Peter showed something which is not yet available. So today, this is how we need to do it. In the future, it might be without this additional step. But now, it's not yet available, so this is how we are doing it now. So the controls are here, generated, and from here is the same approach to the application. In the UI5 application, we just access the library. Again, in the package.json, we have again the dependency to the library. We have the manifest configuration here again, and then we use it exactly the same way in the page. And the result, I will show you. It doesn't look any different. So you don't see any difference. Again, the same intro, the title, the logo, and the articles. So again, to summarize what we did, we have now a web component package with web components, generated the library, and generated the controls as well. If you want to know how to do this, I did last year a session with Peter. I think it's recorded. And there you can see how to do this, all the steps. There are also some blog posts. So, and in the end, we consume it in the app. And that's how UI5 web components work. So it's a little bit different, but the result is the same.
Okay, thank you, Wouter. But now, the follow-up question that everybody has. Which control do I need to use in my productive application? Do I use the UI5 control that I just created? Or do I use the UI5 Web Component control?
In theory, I think UI5 Web Components is native DOM elements. So in theory speaking, web components should be faster. So for performance reasons, you could consider to go for web components. But let's check. So we have like a battle slide where we will challenge them exactly the same. And to prove you, it's already running. But you see, we are starting from the dist folder, which should be simulating production. And now I will go into each one of them. So I will start with the one with control. And both are starting from the dist folder, so both are exactly the same. So I open my debugging tools, and we have here the option for performance. If I click here on this restart and record button, it will reload the page, capture the performance, do some calculation, and will come back with a result based on what happened. And here we see like, oh, this is really fast, 2 seconds for the version of the control. If I do exactly the same for the application with the web component, again, I run the same. It's again restarting the app. It's calculating, it's checking, it's measuring, and then will give us back the result. So here we see, I will put them maybe a little bit next to each other. So you see, the web components here in this case are even slower. And the logic in it, it's exactly the same. In the beginning, sometimes it was faster, sometimes it was equal. Now, at this point, the controls are faster. It depends a little bit of the computer, of course, but we have an additional test where we put them next to each other and run them exactly at the same time. So if I click here on Go, on the left we have the controls, on the right the web components. I will also zoom in. And I click on Go. Although the difference was really limited in seconds, you really have a visual difference when starting. So the one with the controls is always faster for some reason. Even when it's measured faster, visually the rendering is slower. So with that, I have no point, Jérémy, when it comes to performance. Maybe you have a reason to use web components.
I can think of a couple. They already mentioned a couple.
They mentioned it, yeah.
So I don't need to show this slide, but just a little recap. Why I would use UI5 Web Components is because I can use them on different other frameworks. So I can use it in Angular, React, or Vue. And that makes UI5 still the master of the galaxy, which is a nice added value if you are a company that uses the Fiori first strategy. You could just use UI5 everywhere. Then on the other side, and this is just been proven by Peter during his session, we can also use web components, other web components in a UI5 app and have another look and feel. So I don't see really a pro and con to use the UI5 controls or the web components. It will only depend on the company strategy, on your preferences, and yeah. Let's see what the future will bring.
I think in one case it can depend on the developers of your company. If you have a company with a lot of Angular and Vue and React developers, but you want to let them build Fiori applications, you can let them choose which technology and you can make it look like Fiori, if it's for the Fiori Launchpad. On the other hand, it's not an argument anymore to say that the design is not allowed to look like SAP. Even with UI5, like Peter showed, we can take any web component, like every company in the meanwhile has a set of stencils, web components. You can use them and build with UI5 an application that doesn't look like SAP or Fiori. And I think that are the important reasons for going to web components.
I think we need to move up a bit. We have some time, but
we're on time.
Yeah. So, which has the force? Which is the solution?
So, I know it's not easy to start building your own controls. And Jérémy asked me, Wouter, can you help me building a control? But we have something to help you with this. Because I haven't showed you at the beginning, but if you look at a control, and I think, who of you already created a UI5 control? Okay, most of you. So you all feel the pain of writing the renderer. Everyone agrees that it's a pain in the ass? Oh, this is on YouTube, no? So if you look at those renderers, you need to write everything through an API. And I have a solution for this, a generator. So a UI5 Control Generator. And I had this in the beginning on Web IDE, and recently, a year ago, but I thought it wouldn't be relevant anymore with Web Components, but I guess it still is relevant because what Peter showed is not live yet. The UI5 Control Generator is still relevant. And Jérémy, maybe you can show how to use it. I prepared you a project, and what we did now in the project, so it's a dummy empty project. In the project, there is only an HTML file. And the generator will use this HTML file to generate a UI5 control and generate the renderer function for you. So if you look in the package.json, Jérémy, there is a command prepared for you to generate this control. We have the script build controls, and it uses an NPM package, UI5 Control Generator. If you run this, it scans your project for HTML files, and it will try to generate a UI5 control, like Jérémy already did. So if you look again in the control folder, Jérémy, you now see we have a space. Yeah, that's the definition of your control, and we have the renderer. Of course, there are errors because the API is not generated, but therefore there is already an NPM package by Andreas Koens, and that's the other script, so we need to build the TS interfaces now for those controls. If you do that as well, then there should be no errors anymore. So it takes some time, it checks the project. And now there is also the interface, that's a new file. So if you now look in the renderer, there should be no errors anymore. As you can see, errors are resolved, the control is generated. But we also had some logic for generating the stars. So maybe you also need to put in the logic in the space definition. So we used a template for this. There is, voila. So this is just some logic we used to generate the stars on the black background for the Star Wars intro. It's part of the control. It was also in the web component. It was also in the other example. That's just some JavaScript you can add. But the most difficult part is the renderer, which is done for you. And now, Jérémy, if you enable the view, if you use the control in the view, sorry. So we commented it out, but now we can use it. So I know it's not the best practice, and I discourage you to do it without a library. We just do it for demo purpose, directly in the project. But the generator also works in a library. And now, if Jérémy starts the application, we will have the control. Of course, we only generated one control, the space and not the space item. Aggregations, it's not able to resolve, but it's public, it's on GitHub. So if you have any ideas on how to resolve this and how to handle multiple controls with each other, with aggregations, you're free to make a pull request and to help improving it. I think that deserves an applause for Jérémy. So, Jérémy, that's well done. That's
yeah, thank you, Wouter. It's
in 2 minutes.
It's refreshing. So, some takeaways of this session. We tested the performance of UI5 application, UI5 controls versus UI5 Web Components. We didn't see really big differences. There are probably other ways to put them next to each other and battle them out. Peter talked to us yesterday, told us about the size of the controls. They are different. It can have an advantage. So let's see what the future will bring and which will have the best performance in the future. We learned that everything can run on UI5. We just can do everything with UI5, so we don't need React or Vue or some Angular framework, we can do it on UI5. We can put other UI on top with web components. And Wouter showed us how to simplify or helped us simplifying development of UI5 controls with his generator. So thank you, Wouter, that you want to create this beautiful generator and facilitate my life as a developer. Do we want to battle this out with the people, or do they have any other questions? Because we have some time now for questions, and then we...
Yeah, so we could say, we're at the end.
Yeah.
We shared what we wanted to share, so...
Perfect timing, exactly 5 minutes before. Now we have 5 minutes time for Q&A. Any questions here? Oh, there's one over there.
That's all right. Great presentation, thank you, and for the insights. Just Jérémy, on the last point where you mentioned with SAP UI5, we don't need anything else because we can just incorporate the web components. But we also saw the discussion about web components directly with the different frameworks such as Vue, React, Svelte, etc. Do you have based on your experiences, do you have an opinion on when you would use the web components with UI5 to develop an application versus just using web components with one of the other frameworks such as React, etc.?
You want to take it, or?
You can start and I can fill in.
I see cases where, for example, internal portals or intranets, they have a specific design. And sometimes you can perfectly then put in a timesheet, for example. It's a perfect place. And then they say, no, we built a timesheet, another framework, because we don't want to have it look like Fiori. We want to have the same design. Today, if you want to have the same design, you need to go to the team designer, do some tweaks. You cannot reach the same as with web components. So that are the cases, I think, we can now compete with other frameworks and other non-SAP technologies to also give an offering to those questions.
Thank you.
I think one other thing. I think it's a game changer, the web components.
Yeah, we offer beers to the guys and the women who ask questions.
Yeah.
So
almost forgot to mention, we have 5 left.
We have one more question here.
Thank you for the presentation also. I am a baby Jedi in these UI5 stuffs, so it's a really maybe newbie question, but I saw that you have this library controller in another path in your workspace, and you were including that in your project.
Yeah.
So if I want to have more projects that use this library, I have to have this library in my workspace every time. And then when I compile my project, then it will be embedded in my project. When I deploy it into the BTP or something like that, it will be embedded there? It's like that, or?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Now, this is because I'm working locally, and mostly how I at least work at the project, we deploy a library and an application separately to the Launchpad, to for example, an ABAP stack or BTP. And the connection between a library and an application is resolved automatically by the Launchpad or workzone in BTP. That happens because of the technology of the Launchpad. But locally, you need to connect it through NPM. But once deployed, it's just the Fiori Launchpad that resolves the different dependencies. But I don't know to which kind of platform you are deploying. Is it to an ABAP stack or to a BTP? BTP Cloud Foundry, and you use Workzone?
We never did a control like that. We just had 1 or 2 UI5 apps that we use in the workflow management.
Yeah, but
so I don't know what we are doing that exactly. But
yeah, But in BTP Cloud Foundry, you can definitely do this. And normally then it's configuration based off your MTA configuration. If you use the managed app router from WorkZone, that one will resolve it if all the destinations are in the same destination service instance. But that's something I presented yesterday with Marian more in detail. So I think it will also be available and you can look at the recording. There are also a few blog posts about it, so you can look it up. But it's definitely possible but it's work different once it's deployed.
Thank you very much for the speakers. We have to wrap up, but if you still have other questions, you know where to find them. And today is a networking event as well, so connect with each other, ask your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.